Is the reality you're experiencing right now, the one you wake up to every single day, is it actually real? Or could it be something else? Entirely. Today, we're peeling back the layers of a really mind-bending concept, the simulation hypothesis. And this isn't just stuff for sci-fi movies. It's a genuinely profound question. Philosophers, physicists, even business strategists are exploring it.
That's absolutely right. We're going to trace this idea way back to its ancient philosophical roots and then bring it right up to modern science, trying to prove or disprove it. And we'll also dig into some really fascinating economic takes on why someone might even create a simulation in the first place, plus what it might mean for you personally if we found out it was true.
Yeah, our mission here is to distill the key insights, give you that shortcut to being really well informed on a topic that, it touches everything we perceive. Okay, let's unpack this. It might seem like a super modern idea, something driven by video games and VR, but this concept of reality maybe not being fundamental. It's actually incredibly old. It's not just a recent sci-fi thing, is it?
No, not at all. You're spot on. This worry about appearance versus reality, it goes way back. Thinkers throughout history have grappled with it. You've got Plato, obviously, with his allegory of the cave people, just seeing shadows of true reality.
Right, the shadows on the wall.
Exactly. Or Zhuangzi, the ancient Chinese philosopher. He dreamt he was a butterfly, then woke up and seriously questioned, am I a man who dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he's a man?
That blurring of dreams.
That's nicely. And you find similar ideas elsewhere. Some Mesoamerican cultures, like the Aztecs, saw the world as a kind of painting, maybe created by a god. Or look at Mesopotamia, the Babylonian creation myth, Enuma Elish, the world is made from the body of a slain goddess.
Yeah,
it implies a constructed reality, right?
A divine construction.
And then in Western thought, you get René Descartes. He really formalized these deep doubts about what we can actually know for sure with his evil demon idea. Could something be deceiving us about everything? So yeah, these ancient thinkers really laid the groundwork. This isn't a new anxiety.
Okay, fast forward to today. The modern chat around the simulation hypothesis, it often seems to circle back to one really key argument. Yeah. Nick Bostrom's paper from 2003. This feels like the bedrock for so much of the current debate, doesn't it?
It absolutely is. Bostrom's simulation argument, it basically boils down to this core trilemma. He says at least one of these three things has to be true.
Okay, what are the three?
Right. Number one, the human species is very likely to just go extinct before we ever reach a posthuman stage, before we get super technologically mature.
Extinction.
Number two, any civilization that does reach that posthuman stage is extremely unlikely to run loads of simulations of their ancestors or their history. Maybe they lose interest or it's unethical or whatever.
Okay, so they could, but they won't.
Or they won't run many. And number three, if 1 and 2 are false, then we are almost certainly living in a computer simulation right now.
Wow, okay. So that third one, the idea we're in a simulation, it rests on some pretty big assumptions, right? One that always gets me is substrate independence. Can you unpack that? Why is it so important here?
Yeah, great question. Substrate independence is basically the idea that consciousness, our minds, aren't fundamentally tied to our biological brain, our wetware. It suggests consciousness could arise from any system that has the right kind of computational structure.
So not just carbon-based neurons like ours.
Exactly. It could potentially run on silicon-based processors, like in a computer. If that's true, then creating artificial consciousness, maybe even simulating past consciousnesses, becomes theoretically possible.
And the other huge assumption is the sheer computing power these post-human civilizations would have. The numbers seem astronomical.
Oh, they are. Bostrom talks about them potentially converting entire planets or stars into computing resources, running hugely many ancestor simulations. Just to give you a rough idea, one estimate is a planetary mass computer could perform something like 10 to the power of 42 operations per second.
I can't even picture that number.
Nobody really can. But the point is, with that kind of power, simulating the entire mental history of humanity might take, less than 1/1,000,000th of its processing power for just 1 second. It's almost trivial for them.
Okay, so if they can do it, and they don't go extinct, and they do decide to run these simulations,
then statistically, the number of simulated beings, simulated realities, would vastly outnumber the one original base reality.
meaning it's just way more likely that we are one of the simulations rather than the original brewers.
That's the core of the argument. It's probabilistic. If you don't think we're in a simulation now, Bostrom argues, you have to believe that either we'll go extinct soon or future humans just won't bother running many simulations.
Because if they do run lots of them,
Then we're almost certainly in one. It forces you to pick one of the three options in that trilemma.
okay, so Bostrom gives us this compelling philosophical reason to maybe believe we're simulated. The next question then is there any actual evidence, any glitches in the matrix scientists might be looking for?
Right. This is where it gets really interesting, moving from philosophy to physics. One quite provocative idea comes from Melvin Vopson and his proposed second law of infodynamics.
Okay, I know the second law of thermodynamics, everything tends towards disorder, entropy increases. What's infodynamics?
So Vopson suggests that for information systems, the opposite might be true, that entropy or randomness actually decreases over time, or at least stays constant. He argues this could point towards a kind of built-in data optimization or compression mechanism in the universe itself.
Like the universe is constantly trying to run more efficiently, compressing its own data.
Sort of, yeah, like a massive hard drive defragmenting itself. If the universe is a simulation, it would likely need incredibly efficient data management to handle the complexity. So finding evidence of this information entropy decreasing could be a sign. He even analyzed mutations in the SARS-CoV-2 virus, arguing they follow this principle of minimizing information entropy.
Wow, that's a leap, connecting virus mutations to cosmic simulation. So the universe is like self-optimizing code.
That's the implication he's exploring. And beyond that, there are other things in physics people point to.
Like the speed of light.
Exactly. The fact that there's a maximum speed limit in the universe. Some people say, well, maybe that's like a processing speed limit for the simulation's hardware, like the frame rate in a video game.
Okay, I can see the analogy. And what about quantum physics? That always seems weird enough to fit.
Definitely. The observer effect is a big one here. You know, the classic double slit experiment where particles behave like waves when you're not watching, but like particles when you are watching.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Well, one interpretation, and it's just an interpretation, is that the universe only bothers to render reality, to collapse the possibilities into a definite state when an observer needs that information.
So like a video game only rendering the graphics right in front of your character.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother rendering stuff happening miles away until you go there.
That's the analogy some people use, yes. It's computationally efficient, only calculating what needs to be calculated. Does the moon exist if no one is looking? Well, maybe the simulation just doesn't render it fully until someone does.
Right. So if that's the case, if reality only renders when observed, how on earth could we test that? I think Anton Petrov mentioned an experiment.
Yeah, there's a proposed experiment based on that idea. It involves setting up a double-slit experiment, but recording the data onto, say, USB drives without any human looking at the setup or the initial results.
Okay.
Then, crucially, you randomly select a bunch of those USB drives and just destroy them. Completely wipe them, data gone, never observed by anyone.
Destroying the data before anyone sees it.
Right. Then you analyze the data on the remaining drives. The prediction is, if human observation is what causes the wave function to collapse, then the pattern on the surviving drives, where the data could eventually be observed, might look different than if the observation itself didn't matter.
So you're trying to see if the potential for future observation changes the outcome now.
Essentially, yes. Does the universe know which data might eventually be seen? If the results on the remaining drives show the standard particle pattern, like it was observed, but physics predicts it should have been a wave pattern because no one looked during the experiment, that could be a hint of this rendering on demand.
That's quite a setup, a real attempt to find a crack in the facade.
It's highly speculative, of course, but it shows scientists are thinking about testable predictions.
But naturally, not everyone's buying it. As cool as these ideas sound, there are some pretty strong arguments against the simulation hypothesis, especially looking at it from a computational angle, right?
Absolutely. That's a really critical point. One of the major hurdles is often called the computational complexity problem. Researchers like Zohar Ringel have pointed this out.
What's the core issue there?
Well, they argue that we observe quantum systems in the universe, and these systems are incredibly complex. To simulate them accurately, especially at a large scale, seems to require computational resources that grow exponentially. The argument is that simulating the entire universe down to the quantum level might actually require a computer more complex than the universe itself.
Wait, so you need a computer bigger than the universe to simulate the universe.
Oh.
That sounds like a paradox.
Pretty much. It suggests that reality, as we probe it deeper, gets more complex, not simpler, which kind of goes against the idea of finding computational shortcuts or optimizations you might expect in a simulation designed for efficiency.
Okay, but hang on. What about the counterargument? The idea that the simulators wouldn't need to simulate everything down to the quantum level, maybe just the parts we humans interact with or observe. The render-on-demand idea again.
That's the common comeback, yeah. Only simulate what's observed. But even that faces huge challenges. Think about it. To convincingly simulate just our perceived reality, you'd need to simulate everything we could potentially observe or investigate.
Like, if I decide to suddenly look at the Andromeda Galaxy through a powerful telescope, or build a new particle collider.
Exactly. The simulation would need to consistently render macroscopic objects, sure, but also the results of complex scientific experiments. It would need to have the answers ready if someone decides to, say, reread all the papers on quantum electrodynamics. It needs to simulate our computers down to the logic gates if we look closely.
So just simulating the surface isn't enough, because we keep digging deeper.
Right. The level of detail required, even just for the observed parts, seems immense and perhaps computationally intractable anyway.
And what about quantum computers? Couldn't future simulators use those? We always hear about how powerful they'll be.
That's another point people raise. But while quantum computers are amazing for certain specific types of calculations, especially simulating other quantum systems, they aren't necessarily a magic bullet for everything. They're not universally faster than classical computers for all tasks. It's not clear they could just handle the sheer scale and diversity of computation needed for a full universe simulation efficiently.
So the basic problem remains. The scale seems impossible with physics as we understand it.
That's the core challenge from the computational complexity side. The argument goes that the outer universe, the one supposedly running our simulation, would likely run out of resources or succumb to its own entropy, heat death disorder long before it could simulate our universe reaching its current state of complexity. The simulation seems harder to run than the real thing.
Okay, so we've got philosophical arguments for and physics arguments for and against. Let's pivot a bit. There's this really unique angle. Forget the how, what about the why? If some civilization did build our reality, what was their motivation? What's the business model behind the universe?
Yeah, this is a fascinating perspective from a recent paper. They introduced the term simuverse, basically, a universe that is a simulation. And their core argument is, look, creating something like this would take vast resources, unimaginable amounts of energy and computation. So there probably has to be some kind of economic or, business incentive driving it. It's likely not just a hobby project for these posthumans.
Right. It's a massive investment.
Right.
So what kind of business models could justify creating a whole reality?
They lay out a few possibilities, kind of scaling up. First, you could have Simuverse as a project.
Like an internal thing.
Exactly. An internal project run by, say, a government or a huge corporation in the real world. The purpose could be education, maybe historical research, running ancestor simulations like Bostrom discussed, or entertainment, or maybe generating vast amounts of data to train advanced AIs.
Okay, like a giant R&D effort or a training ground.
Then they suggest it could evolve into Simuverse as a service, sauce, basically.
Like cloud computing, but for universes.
Kind of. The provider runs the Simuverse and sells access to external clients. Maybe researchers or artists or who knows, other AIs pay a subscription or a fee to use the simulation for their own purposes. The provider gets revenue and economies of scale. The client doesn't have to build their own Simuverse from scratch.
Rent a reality. And the final stage.
That's Simuverse as a platform, SciP. This is more like today's app stores or social media platforms. The Simuverse provider builds the underlying infrastructure and facilitates interactions between different users and third-party creators within the simulation. Think network effects, user-generated content, AI feedback loops, all happening inside this simulated reality, potentially generating huge value for the platform owner.
So our universe could be someone else's platform business, leveraging our interactions and creations.
That's the speculative idea. The paper even talks about business model pathways, how a Simuverse might start as a project, then become a service, then a platform.
And they also think about the risks involved, not just for us, but for the simulators.
Yeah, which is interesting. They consider risks for the simulators like, the project failing, budget cuts, maybe bugs causing unexpected shutdowns, or operator dissatisfaction, maybe the sims get boring, or even external threats like hackers trying to breach the simulation.
Hackers from the outer universe.
Wow. And for us, the simulated beings or agents, the risks could include things like the moral criteria of our creators. Are we living up to their expectations? Or perhaps the risk associated with trying to escape the simulation.
This whole business angle.
Yeah.
It puts a different spin on Bostrom's argument, doesn't it?
It really does. It suggests that if there are viable business models, ways to actually make running simulations worthwhile or profitable, then it becomes more likely that advanced civilizations would actually do it.
So the odds of us being in a simulation might actually go up if creating realities makes economic sense.
That's the implication. It adds a layer of economic realism or maybe cynicism to the whole debate. Our existence could literally be a product, a service, or a platform.
Okay, let's imagine for a second. Concrete proof is found. Maybe scientists uncover some fundamental pixelation of reality, or, I don't know, a literal cube of non-reality, like one source mentioned. It's undeniable. We're in a simulation. How do you think people would react? How would you react? How does society even process that?
Oh, man. The reactions would likely be all over the map, I suspect. For a lot of people, maybe even the majority. After the initial shock, life would just go on.
Really? Just apathy?
Well, maybe apathy mixed with pragmatism. You still have to pay rent, feed your family, go to work, right? The nature of the substrate underneath might feel irrelevant to daily struggles, especially if there's no obvious way out or change. If this simulation is our reality, then it's the only one we've got.
Okay, so some might just shrug? What about others?
You definitely see extremes. Some might lean heavily into escapism, maybe existing fake enjoyments like video games, art, virtual worlds become even more appealing, seen as just different layers of simulation. Others could fall into a deep existential crisis. Despair. If life isn't real in the fundamental sense, does anything matter? Does it lack inherent value?
And then you get the exploiters, right? The hackers.
Absolutely. People trying to find the cheat codes, the glitches, ways to manipulate the simulation's rules for personal gain. The ultimate hackers.
And religion. Philosophy. That would surely get shaken up. Someone called it creationism for nerds.
Huh. Yeah, that phrase captures it well. You could see many existing religions adapting their narrative. See? We told you there was a creator. Our God is the programmer. It maps surprisingly well for some.
So confirmation for the faithful just with a tech loss?
Potentially.
Right.
But you'd also likely see brand new religions where cults spring up. Maybe groups worshiping the simulators, or others dedicated to finding escape, perhaps through pretty extreme methods. Think Heaven's Gate, but on a potentially larger scale.
And that could lead to conflict too, couldn't it? If people start arguing about who's real.
Oh, definitely. Imagine schisms over interpretation. Are some people players from the outside and others just sophisticated NPCs, shadow people? That kind of thinking could justify horrific actions if some groups decide others aren't real enough.
That's a dark thought. And what about science? If we know it's a simulation, does physics just stop or change completely?
It would fundamentally change. Our existing grand theories, the Big Bang, dark matter, dark energy, might suddenly be reinterpreted. Are they fundamental truths or just, the backstory written by the simulators? Maybe dark matter is just a world-building error or a placeholder.
So cosmology becomes literary analysis of the simulation's code.
In a way. And you'd almost certainly see a new branch of science emerge, something blending physics and computer science, specifically focused on studying the simulation itself, reverse engineering the code of reality.
It's overwhelming to think about. But, reflecting on all this, what really stands out to you? Even if we are living in some vast, complex simulation, does it diminish our experiences?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, even if the substrate is silicon rather than atoms as we thought, our experiences within this reality, the joy, the pain, the love, the choices we make, they still feel real to us. They are our reality, whatever its ultimate nature.
Yeah. The simulation might be the map, but the journey feels real. Well, we've gone from ancient Greek caves to quantum physics, from philosophical trilemmas to cosmic business models, and thought about what it all means for us. This question, are we living in a simulation? It really does challenge our basic understanding of everything.
And it leads to one final, really recursive thought. What if we develop the technology? What if our civilization reaches a point where we can run complex ancestor simulations?
Ah, right. If we become the simulators.
If we start creating our own simulated realities, doesn't that lend massive support to Bostrom's third proposition? Remember, if civilizations don't usually run simulations, we're likely not in one. But if we start doing it,
It makes it much more likely that someone before us did it too, and we're one of theirs.
exactly. By becoming the creators, we might just be confirming our own simulated nature. We could be just one layer in a potentially infinite stack of realities, turtles all the way down, as they say.
It certainly gives you something to think about, doesn't it? Something to
Definitely.
chew on as you go about your day, looking at the world around you.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those big questions, and stay curious.